Yeah, よく料理する
Okay.
と
と
思います。
思います。
Remember the と, right?
Yeah, I marked it, but I left the toe out.
Okay. So you need to stick the toe in. Like
Stick
testing
the
the
toe
water.
in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're not testing the water in a pool, but you still need to stick the toe in.
Sounds fun. Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, よく料理すると思います。Right? メアリーさんはよく料理すると思います。はい。じゃあ2番。
メアリーさんは車を運転すると思います。
はい、いいですね。3番どうぞ。
メリーさんはタバコを吸わないと思います。
はい。Good usage of a short form negative. いいですね。じゃあ次。4番ですね。
メリーさんは毎日 every day?
はい、毎日。
毎日日本語を
話す。
話すと思います。
はい。Question?
My question was, what if it's someone else who's doing the thinking? In all these sentences, the I think part is implied, but
Right.
if it's someone else doing the thinking,
Ah,
where does it go?
do you remember we've talked about the wa ga thing? We've done like
Yeah.
watashi wa neko ga suki desu. I like cats, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can do watashi wa Mary さんが毎日日本語を話すと思います。
Okay.
I think that Mary does such and such. So if you want to say that somebody else thinks that Mary does that, たけしさんはメアリーさんが毎日日本語を話すと思います。
So you wouldn't have two
So that-
laws in the same
It would,
sentence.
usually it would be a wa first and then a ga. For
Okay.
the second
That was
one
the
that
bit we
should
were
have been wa otherwise turns to ga when there would have been two was in the same sentence. Usually you don't see two was in the same sentence. Generally the second one shifts to ga if necessary.
Is that what's
And-
happening in the first, never mind, in the example?
Mary
Never
sound,
mind.
well, no, that
No,
one
right,
just,
yeah.
Mary, you're saying, I think that Mary is good at Japanese. Now,
Hmm.
if you wanted to say that somebody else thinks that, you would probably still shift that wa to ga, and then the other ga would have to stay ga. So you'd end up with two gas in the same sentence, which is a little awkward, but it's better than any other alternative that you might think of. So, if Takeshi is the one who thinks this, Takeshi-san wa Mary-san ga nihongo ga jouzu da to omoimasu. It sounds a little odd to have two ga's in the same sentence, but it's better than two wa's in the same sentence.
Right.
That's why we invented thought bubbles.
Oops.
Just put it in a
Yeah.
thought bubble.
And this is an example of why context helps so much in Japanese, because you can leave out the parts that are understood and avoid some of these particle conundrums. So if you've been having a whole conversation about what Takeshi thinks of things, you might be able to just go ahead and say, Mary-san wa nihongo ga jouzu da to omou, and have it understood by both parties that you're still talking about Takeshi's opinions about things, because that's what the whole conversation has been about.
Mhm.
So, that kind of helps deal with some of those issues sometimes. Okay, じゃあ次行ってみましょうか。Mary-san?
I'm confused about this one.
Ah, this one's a little bit more confusing, doesn't it? Doesn't go home late at night. So, do you remember the basic rule of thumb for a phrase like this that doesn't have a subject? The subject's already understood to be Mary-san, right? So what do? We work it backwards, right? So start with at night.
So, konban.
Well, that would be tonight, but night in general is just ban or yoru. Yeah, either one.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Late is,
osoku.
yes, so osoku, so yoru osoku,
Yoru osoku kaeru.
hai, okay, kairu is to go home, so what would be not go home?
Kaeru or
Kai-
kaeru.
Kairanai.
Oh, kaeranai.
Okay, so yoru osoku kairanai, right? Yoru osoku kairanai. And then what do you add? Big print.
Toomou.
Hi. So, Mary-san wa yoru osoku kairanai to omoimasu. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody just remember that rule of thumb if you're trying to figure out a confusing, complex phrase like that. Working it backwards works like 99% of the time.
You gotta speak.
Yeah. Okay, so yoru osoku kairanai to omoimasu. じゃあ6番どうぞ。
コーヒーがあまり飲まない
Okay, instead of ga,
はを
there you go. Yeah.
コーヒーをあまり飲まないと思います。
Hi. And you can put the amari where you left it, or you could move it to the front. Amari kohi o nomanai to omoimasu. Whichever one is less confusing for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I was trying to figure out where to put it in the.
Yeah. And again, that working it backwards thing helps because the much is last in English, which means
yeah.
it can go first in Japanese.
It's a good rule of
So,
thumb.
amari kohi o nomanai to omoimasu. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
じゃあ、堀さん、次。
メリーさんは映画に見に行くと思います。
Hi. Okay, here we have the exception that proves the rule. We've been talking about working it all backwards, but you left out the often because that one, it can go in more than one place in
Yeah.
English too, so it doesn't always work. But yoku, generally speaking, do you remember where time and frequency adverb phrases tend to be?
Right after the topic.
Right after the topic, right after the
So-
wa, yeah.
メリーさんはよく映画に見
映画
映画を
を
Yeah.
見
見に行くと思います。
はい
So many verbs.
I know, yeah, so メアリーさんはよく映画を見に行くと思います。Why is it all there?
I'll come back to me.
I have no idea. 'Cause, I was going off the.
Okay,
structure
let's
that
write
we're
this one
chapter.
out so everybody can practice. So, okay, so メアリーさんはよく映画を見に行くと思います, right? Okay, so if you break this apart, what's this thing? Miniku. What's going on there?
Kanji. I don't know.
Yes, it is kanji. How about that?
Purpose for which you are going.
Right.
Yeah.
So mi is from
Miru.
miru, right? iku is obvious, right?
go, yeah.
Iku, to go, right? So, mi ni iku, the reason it's ni here is because what?
I don't, that's just the way it is. right?
That's the stem plus ni
Yeah.
iku format, right? That's the pattern. It's always stem of the verb plus ni plus the destination verb, right? So, iku, kuru, kaeru, those are the only ones you've learned thus far. Okay. Okay, so mini ku, mini kuru, mini kaeru, those are the ones you know how to put there, right? Okay, so going for the purpose of watching, or coming for the purpose of watching, or returning home for the purpose of watching, right? One of those three. Those are our options at this point, right? So, why, oh,
So it's the thing that you're looking at, the way you're watching.
yes, because the basic verb here was miru, right? Miniku, the base verb is miru. That's the main action, right? You're going, yes, but why are you going? For the purpose of watching. Okay? So watching is just as important here as going, right? Because otherwise you've lost your purpose. Okay, so miru is important. What are we going to miru?
Eiga.
Eiga. Okay? And what's the relationship between eiga and miru?
Verb and direct object.
Verb and direct object, right? So what particle do we use between a verb and a direct object? O, right? So that's how you know that that's the right particle to go there. Now, obviously, when you're in the middle of a conversation with a Japanese person, you don't want to have to diagram it out and figure it out by logic before you open your mouth, right? So in normal conversation, there are going to be times when you just forget, use the wrong particle, don't put a particle, whatever. But if you're trying to understand what's supposed to go where, it's important to know this. And then what happens is if you practice it enough correctly, then it starts to become automatic eventually. And there will come a time in your development with the language where it just sounds right that way. And you don't have to think through all the logical steps of it. It's just, oh, Mary-san wa yoku eiga o miniku tomo. And it just feels right to say it like that, and doing it in any other way would feel wrong.
Like how the conjugations feel when we do them together.
Right, yeah, if you're practicing omou, omoimasu, omoimasen, omoimashita, omoimasen dashita, omoimashou, and then omou, omoanai, that's as far as we've gotten this far. Omotte, omotteiru, omotteimasu, omotteimasen, omotteimashita, omotteimasen dashita. They all sound right now, right? You're used to them. So thank you for highlighting that for us. That was good, because I think that was a good review for everybody, that grammar structure. Okay? It's one of those grammar structures, the stem ni iku structure. That's one of those that we learned, we used a bunch, and now we're on to something else, and they're not making you use it every day. So you have a hard time.
I think we learned that last year.
We're at that place in the book now where I start telling people, if you haven't done it already, make yourself some kind of a reference sheet that keeps track of what kinds of grammar structures require the short form, like tomo, what kind of grammar structures require stem, like ni iku, and what kind of grammar structures require te form, like te mo ii desu ka, te wa ikemasen, te kudasai, te iru, te imasu, right?
You can probably find a cheat sheet on the line.
I believe on Canvas I do have a what goes where chart that a former student made, and I've posted, so you might already have a reference there if you want it, but if you don't find it in Canvas, you can also make it for yourself. start keeping track of what goes where for these kinds of structures now, while you only have a few in each category. Because they're gonna keep adding more structures to each category, and they're gonna keep adding categories. And it can get really out of hand if you don't get a handle on these before you move on to the next. Okay, because they're gonna add some more conjugations, they're gonna add more things you can do with the conjugations you've got, you know, so Japanese grammar is full of this stuff. So it's a good idea to keep practicing what you've got thus far before the new thing gets piled on top. Okay, so よく英語を見に行くと思う。じゃあ8番。
ネイリさんは、結婚じゃないと思います。
What is to be married? 結婚する is to get married, but is married would be
しています。
しています. So short form of that would be
している。
yes, している. So 結婚している is married. So not married would be short form 結婚していない. Yeah, いるいない. It's a ru verb. いるいます. Right? いるいますいない. Drop the ru, add mas. Drop the ru, add nai. Right? いるいますいない. So 結婚している結婚していない. So put the whole thing together.
ネイリさんは結婚
していない
いないと思います。
はい、そうです. Okay, and let's talk about that one for just a second because I know exactly where that confusion is coming from. You watch anime, right?
No.
No? But you have some exposure to Japanese, like spoken, you watch any
Well, I
Japanese
have.
dramas or
I
something?
do that.
You watch some of that stuff, right? So, te iru, te inai are the proper forms of these two words. But in casual conversation situations, this e often disappears. Okay? So proper grammar says 結婚している, 結婚していない. Slang says 結婚してる, 結婚してない. Okay? Japanese people know the difference. But the problem with that is you've also got aru. You remember aru versus iru? You know, what's aru short form of? What's the mas form of aru? What is the short form of? Aru becomes arimas, right? Remember arimas imas as in neko ga imasu, hon ga arimasu. You remember that stuff? And the short form of this is nai, right? You see a problem? Yeah, there could be some confusion about, well, are we talking about inanimate or animate if you say it the slang way, tenai. Native speakers don't have a problem with it because they know, right? So, you know.
I'm not following.
Like she's saying, don't drop the E because you could come off wrong with,
Yeah.
with the translation.
Your translation and your comprehension of it all can get confused because of this. Because nine and nine instead of inai versus nine. Nine by itself is the negative of aru. Inai is the negative of iru. If you drop this E, it creates some confusion in your brain where you're starting to get confused. Wait a minute. Am I saying te inai or am I saying te nai? But te imas forms need to be with iru inai not arunai. You see what I'm saying? So this is a slang thing, which if you've watched a lot of Japanese movies or whatever, you get so used to hearing it the slang way that you might forget the E is even in there. But it's in there, even if they're not saying it. The other thing that happens, of course, is in dialect, you get other words replacing iru and inai. Like in the dialect region where I was, they did te oru and te oran was the negative.
That's just the.
Yeah, and their slang, their contraction was toru and toran. So, talk about frying your brain, you know. Yeah. 結婚しとる? 結婚しとんの? しとらん? Huh? You just lost people, you know, if you don't know that dialect. So don't worry about dialect.
I wonder
right
if Google
now.
Translate knows that. Just kidding.
I doubt it. I highly doubt that Google Translate knows how to deal with Japanese dialects. Half of Japan doesn't know how to deal with Japanese dialects. The average Japanese person knows how to speak their own dialect, whatever that may be, and can at least understand Tokyo Standard when they hear it. Some of them can switch back and forth and they're bidialectal. Some people can really only speak their own dialect and they cannot switch into Standard no matter how hard they try.
That's why we invented texting.
But the average Japanese person only knows their own dialect and or Tokyo Standard. They don't necessarily know any other dialects of the country unless they have moved to that region and lived in that region for a while. And there are no textbooks for dialect that I know of.
Right one.
No thanks. I'll pass. So anyway, so shiteiru, shiteinai is the pronunciation we're going for now. We'll worry about slang when you're parents.
Good, sounds good.
Okay? But if you're a big fan of Japanese film and you watch a lot of anime or whatever, listen for it. You'll notice it. It's very noticeable once you know what you're listening for. Okay, so 結婚していないと思います. Right? じゃあ、次、9番ですね。
メアリーさんはたけしさんが好きだと思います。
はい、好きだと思います。メアリーさんはたけしさんが好きだと思います。Mary likes Takeshi. Right. And yes, that has both meanings just like it does in English, so we don't really know whether she likes him as a friend or she wants to date him.
Maybe we'll find out in the next chapter.
Just
kidding.
Yeah, the soap opera continues. どうぞ。
メリーさんは忙しいと思います。
はい、忙しいと思います。Notice that the adjectives, you just
That's it.
use that. はい。Maryさん
For a good student, am I going to use Jozuna or am I going to use
ああ、いい学生。
E? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mary-sanはいい学生と思います.
What needs to come after 学生?
学生だ.
Yes.
Okay. だと思います.
That's the one. Yes. いい学生だと思います. Okay, so after non-adjectives and nouns in the positive, we add the da in there, which is the short form of des. はい。どうぞ。
メアリーさんは背が高くないと思います。
はい、背が高くないと思います. Yeah, that's one of the ones that's a little hard to say sometimes, but there it is. 高くないと思います. どうぞ。
メアリーさんは静かじゃないと思います。
じゃないと思います。
はい、じゃないと思います。はい、いいですね。Did that help? Do you feel like now you've got a better handle on what you're supposed to be doing with to omoimasu and why? Because you can listen to the CD also for trying to figure out what the correct answers are for this exercise. But if you don't understand why that's the correct answer, you might still be confused even after doing the exercise. Okay. じゃあ、シアラさんとタチアナさん、can you guys read the Q&A for the next example now?
この人は日本人ですか？
日本人だと思います。いいえ、日本人じゃないと思います。
Hi. So what we're doing for this next exercise is we're looking at this little picture and we're making guesses about the person based on the picture. So you're going to ask the question and then the next person is going to answer with either a positive yes, I think he is blank, or no, I think he's not blank kind of answer. Okay, どうぞ。
山下先生はいい先生ですか？
いい先生だと思います。
だと思います。
だと思います。
はい。
Or いいえ、いい先生じゃないと思います。
はい。Okay, so you did both examples. You can just choose one if you prefer.
Okay.
Okay, どうぞ。2番。
有名ですか Or I should say,
Yeah.
山下先生は有名ですか
Either way.
いいえ。有名じゃないと思います。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ次。
今ですか？
暇 what needs to go after a non-adjective?
She said だ。
暇だと。
今だと思います。
はい、いいですね。暇だと思います。じゃあ4番、どうぞ。
頭がいいですか？
頭がいいと思います。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ5番どうぞ。
背が高いですか？
難しいと思います。
What?
Wait,
You were reading this.
頭がいい、no, it's 背が高いですか? So you're answering, do you think
Oh,
he's
okay.
tall?
I was on the wrong one.
Yeah.
I was thinking I was doing 6, not 5.
Okay.
Oh, だと思います。
Okay, 背が高いと思います. Remember, it's an E adjective, so no da.
Okay.
Okay, so 高いと思います. 背が高いと思います. じゃあ次の質問どうぞ.
難しいですか?
忙しいと思います。はい、と思います。
Could we just said he had free time and now we're saying he's busy?
Well, we're taking guesses. So one person guessed one way and somebody else guessed the other way. Right? So that works. It's just your
not
guess.
accurate. Okay.
Yeah. It's just a guess.
結婚していますか？
いいえ、結婚していないと思います。
はい、いいですね。
お金をたくさん持っていますか？
いいえ、持っていないと思います。
はい、いいですね。
山下先生はよく食べますか？
食べると思います。
はい。ね。
よくスポーツをしますか？
いいえ、よくスポーツを
スポーツを why does it have to have the shimasu, the shinai to omoimasu?
Because otherwise you'd be saying he is sports.
Yeah,
It's
it
so
has to,
weird.
the most important part is whatever the last part is. You don't have to repeat all the other information, but you have to have, at minimum, the final piece, the verb or whatever the ending is.
So you don't put the da after the sports?
No, because that's not the final piece.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're gonna use the whole sentence in your answer, yoku sports o suru to omoimasu, or yoku sports o shinai to omoimasu. Okay? Yeah, the case where you would have sports da to omoimasu would be like, if sports were the ending of the question, you know, sports desu ka? If that were the ending of the question, hai, sports da to omoimasu. You know, like, if you were asking, you know, Yamashita sensei no senmon wa sports desu ka? Sengo wa sports desu ka? Is his major sports, and you wanted to say, no, it's not sports. Iie, sports janai to omoimasu. Or, yes, it is sports. Hai, sports da to omoimasu. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yoku sports o shimasu ka? Ne, shinai to omoimasu. Okay, last question.
フランス語を話しますか？
話しないと思います。
Hana, what's the change? Ku to ka, so su to
聞かない or
hanasanai.
話さない。
Okay, the u verb, the u changes to a for the short form negative. Okay, hanasu, hanasanai. So once more.
そう
Hana-
話さないと思います。
はい、いいですね。Okay, じゃあ次 you get to ask part 1 of picture B. So now we're looking at this picture of a beach somewhere in the world. We have no idea where this beach is. So,
ここは日本、ここは日本ですか？
いい日本だと思います。
so that would be or はい、
or はい。
日本だと思います。Could be, I don't know. どうぞ。2番。有名
有名な
ところ
ところですか？
はい。
有名
有名なところだ。
Yeah, 有名なところだ that works. と
思います。
はい、
Okay.
有
I was
名
thinking I
な
had
と
to
こ
put
ろ
something
だ
else
と
there.
思います。
Oh, okay. 空気は
きれい。
ですか？
That's a weird question.
Ah, that's a very Japanese question. Okay, what is kuki?
Air.
Air. What's kirei?
Clean.
Clean.
Oh, I was thinking
Okay.
pretty. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
Is the air beautiful?
Okay.
Yeah. Is the air clean? Yeah. Very Japanese question.
Yes. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay. Kire.
はい、綺
Oh,
麗。
kire da to omoimasu.
はい、綺麗だと思います。いいですね。4番。
Atsui desu ka?
暑いと思います。
はい。どうぞ。
冬は寒いですか? Just a general question.
Well, no, it's asking about the, do you think the winter in this place?
Okay, so
would
how would
be
you
cold?
how would you say that then? ここの冬
Yeah,
This
but
place
just
is-
fuyu wa samui desu ka, we already know we're talking about this place, so you
Okay.
don't have to put the subject in. But if you really wanted to, you could say, koko no fuyu wa samui desu ka, or koko wa fuyu ga samui desu ka. You could do the wa ga thing again.
いや、冬は寒くないと思います。
はい、いいですね。6番。
人がたくさん住んでいますか？
たくさん住んでると思います。
住んで、what's your final conjugation there? たくさん住んで、what do you change it to for short form? We just talked about it. 住んでいると、yeah, okay, so anytime you've got a te imasu structure and sunde imasu qualifies, right? Even though it's de, not te, that's because sumu conjugates to sunde, right? So sundeiru qualifies. ですね。
ここの人はよく泳ぎますか？
はい、よく泳ぎと思います。
Yoku, what's the verb form?
あ
So oyogimasu changes to
Oyoga.
oyo. Well, that would be anai is the negative. What's the positive short form? Dictionary form is another way to.
泳ぐ
Hai. To.
と思います。
There you go. Yoku oyogu to omoimasu. じゃあ最後の質問。
夏によく雨が降りますか？
What was Furimaska again?
To fall.
Yeah, Omega Furu.
Okay.
Ame ga furu means the rain falls.
Okay. Senzen amui ga
Ame ga.
ame ga furanai to omoimasu.
はい、いいですね。Okay, いいですか? Any questions about those guys? Let me check time real quick. Oh, we got time now. Go to the next one? Yeah, we just got a few minutes, right? Yeah.
It's 10:15.
Wait a minute, we go to 10:40, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got time. We can do some more, yay!
Yeah, but okay.
Making progress.
Yeah, okay, so let's look at the next one. So I'm gonna get Hori-san to Sierra-san to read the example for us this time.
大学の食堂
食堂
についてどう思いますか?
Okay, before we move on, let's just pick that one apart. Okay, so Daigaku no Shokudo, first of all, is what?
Says right there.
University, cafeteria, right? Shokudo is cafeteria. Notice the kanji in Shokudo. What's the first part? The shoku part is the ta from taberu, right? And the do means a hall. So it's literally a food hall, dining hall. Makes sense, right? An eating hall. Okay, so daigaku no shokudo ni tsuite means what?
About or concerning.
About, concerning, regarding, right? Do omoimasu ka?
Sort of, what do you think about it?
Yes, okay.
How do you think about
Yeah,
it?
it's how do you think, which doesn't work in English, but it's close to either what do you think about or how do you feel about
How do you
X.
think with my brain?
Yeah, 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 how do you think with your brain, right, yeah. How many ESL students have been tripped up by that one? So obviously Japanese has a different idiom than English for this kind of construction, but the point is they're basically asking your opinion of the thing that's underlined. Does that make sense? Okay, so Sierra-san, why don't you read D's opinion of this?
安くて美味しいと思います。私はよく食べに行きます。
はい
A さんはどう思いますか？
Right. So, what's B saying about 大学の食堂? 安くて美味しいと思います. So that is, again, we're resurrecting one of our cheap and delicious. Remember the kute, connecting two adjectives to each other, te form of the first adjective followed by another adjective. So it's like and, cheap and delicious. To omoimasu, right? I think it's cheap and delicious. 私はよく食べに行きます. What's frequent?
Go.
Yeah.
Going to eat there.
I often go there for the purpose of eating, right? As opposed to going there for a food fight. Right? And then A-san wa dou omoimasu ka? And by the way, you can substitute the person's actual name instead of saying A-san. So you can say Kori-san wa dou omoimasu ka? Right? And then Kori-san can answer with,
私は
and then the dot 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 is because they want you to make up your own idea. Okay, so you can give your own opinion now about 大学の食堂.
私は美味しいじゃない
How do you conjugate おいしい?
美味しいない
おいし
美味しくないと思います。
はい、おいしくないと思います。おいしくないと思います. Okay, so I think it's not delicious. はい.
So can you substitute, can you say anatawa instead of like someone's name and san? Or is it
You
not?
can, but it's not really used much.
Let's bring it back.
It's not as boring.
Well, anata has different connotations depending on the intonation you put to it. And so you have to be careful, because if you give it the wrong tonality, it ends up sounding like an endearment between spouses. So if that's not your intention, it sounds awkward.
We should practice that.
Well, the thing is, because of living in those two different regions where the pitch accents were all reversed, my pitch accents are all screwed up, and I don't actually know how to teach you the right way to say anata that doesn't sound like you're greeting your spouse. You know, that's one of those things where I need to get with a native speaker who speaks Tokyo Standard and get them to tell me how they can say anata properly, you know, that would work for a stranger. Because there are times when you kind of need that. But Lana, did you hear it used much? Because I sure didn't hear anata.
No.
Hardly
No,
ever,
never
right?
use it, yeah.
Nobody uses it in Japan.
Maybe there's someone on YouTube that does.
You
Yeah.
usually know their name, or you hope you remember their name, because if not, you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, because it's just rare to hear it used. Now, 20-some years ago, otaku still worked as a polite word for you. That doesn't work anymore, unfortunately.
There is a connotation now.
Yeah, it definitely has a connotation now, different from what it had in the
Kisama used to be
90s.
polite too, so.
Well, Kisama, that was a lot longer ago, but
Yeah,
that
but it
was
just
polite.
shows us like.
Yeah.
Like, I hear that in anime, but it's not ever in a nice way when they say
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Because
like old
I
samurai
think-
movies.
Yeah, Kisama was polite like 400 years ago. Yeah, Kisama, I mean, it's literally the sama that's in Lord, but, yeah, these days, it's like either talking way down to somebody or expressing extreme dislike of that person,
That's
or
why you'll
like
never hear
really
it in anime.
disrespectful.
Yeah.
That's why you only hear it in anime, because it's rare to hear it in real life, because it's too darn rude. Same thing with even omae. Used to be okay, at least for an adult talking to a child, but I think even that is gone by the wayside. You know, and even kimi. It wasn't that long ago that guys still called their girlfriends kimi, but I think that one's starting to disappear too. Because, you know, Japanese feminism. Women are starting to say, hey, I don't want to be talked down to, you know?
So all
Just
this-
because you're 1 year older than me doesn't mean I'm your inferior, you know?
So like all the speech in anime, they pretty much don't use in real life. Cause I mean, just like a lot of
Yeah.
these words I'm hearing,
Okay,
it's like only in anime.
think about Hollywood movies. Do people really talk like that all the time in real life? I mean, how many times does the F-bomb get dropped in a movie compared to in real life?
I don't know, there's some people that I know.
There are
that-
some people who talk like movies, yes. Yeah, in fact, yeah, my Japanese roommate, when she moved to New York after, we were roommates for 2 years in Georgia, and then she moved to New York to go to a different college for film studies, because we didn't have that major where we were, and that's what she finally decided she wanted to do. So she was up there, and she just moved to New York City, getting settled in, and she commented to me, they talk just like the movies up here. Yeah, she was not expecting that. After rural Georgia for 2 years, she hadn't heard all that language outside of the theaters.
Colorful, as we like to say.
Yeah, the colorful metaphors were getting out of hand.
Sure.
Yeah, but just like, you know, not everybody in the movies talks the same way, and not everybody in real life talks like the movies. Not everybody in real life talks like anime. Yeah, so some of that is somewhat true to life, some of it is way over the top.
It's usually high schoolers talk like that. If you go to high school, everybody sounds like they're in anime, 'cause they're
Yeah.
young.
'Cause they wanna be
But when
shown
you're an
like
adult,
heroes.
you don't talk like that. But if you're with your girlfriends, you don't even really talk like that too, even if you're close, because it's too rough sounding, you sound like a boy. It's
Yeah.
becoming more popular, like I've heard girls refer to themselves as boku, and it's like, you are not boku. Like, what is that? And they're like 6. So, but it's
Yeah.
becoming more, you just have to be really careful who you use it with, because you
Right.
might offend somebody and they won't tell you. So you'll keep using it and they'll keep getting more irritated, but they're too polite to tell you that you're saying it wrong.
Right.
So that's why it's best to just always use them, also be overly polite, because it's just way.
Yeah,
hurt
your
anybody's
safe,
feelings.
your safest bet is be polite until your Japanese friends start saying, why are you being so darn polite? Can't we use casual speech? We're such good friends. You know, and then you're like, oh, okay. You know,
Like, I've heard 2 men like say like ore, like ore wa, and like stuff
yeah.
like that.
Now, ore
That's
does
like-
get used. That is the masculine pronoun that has replaced boku for modern times. A lot of guys do use ore, especially like your generation. Guys who are a lot older, a lot of times older men still use boku because that was the norm in their generation, and they're just not interested in changing. You know, if they're 50 plus, they're probably not going to use ore. If you meet little kids, they still learn boku. Yeah, little cutie pies learn boku, you know. But as they get older, by the time they get into like middle school, a lot of times they're shifting over to ore, at least some of the time. They'll probably still use boku with their family because they don't want to let on to their parents that they're using coarse slang in school.
Yeah.
Because it's not bad exactly, but it does sound a little bit overly mature for like a 12-year-old.
Yeah,
You know.
I heard it sounds like rough.
It sounds a little rough, yeah. And I don't know for sure, but I know that some of this rough language, it comes out of slang and dialects that are sort of associated with Yakuza. So you want to be careful how much yakuza you put into your speech. It's kind of like in this country, you want to be careful the impression you're giving. If you really feel like wearing your pants hanging down past your hips, that gives a different impression than if you're wearing them on your waist with the belt,
It's like a 12-year-old in
It's all
a
about that
mess.
suit and tie
They all want to sound like
Yeah.
gangsters or.
Yeah, well, kids go through a phase where they want to talk like a gangster, and then most of the time, they mature and they grow out of that, and they start talking like an adult, right?
Normal person.
But being in a Yakuza all your life is really
You can really alienate some people.
Yeah, you just don't joke about that at all.
Yeah.
They don't get it, they don't get our humor.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Western dark humor and Western sarcasm, yeah.
I had a quick question. In anime also, like, it's like always with the really like old men characters, instead of saying watashi, they say washi. Like, is that slang too?
That is an old-fashioned watashi, yes.
Okay.
And that is,
Sounds weird.
yeah, it's an old-fashioned and masculine form, yeah.
So many things for I.
Yeah, yeah, there's so many pronouns for I, and they all have different implications. They give different connotations to your speech. So, there's an old novel from like the late 1800s, political satire, the English translation is just I am a cat for the title, but it's waga hai wa neko de aru, which is like this really highfalutin language that's like, it's I, hot. It's that kind of attitude, like you would expect a cat to have, and the whole book is like the cat's perspective on the idiot humans and their stupid political shenanigans. It's hilarious. Yeah, and it's even more hilarious if you get advanced enough that you can start reading it in the original Japanese, because it's really biting sarcasm, but it's all done in this like very sophisticated style where if you didn't know that it was meant to be sarcastic, you would think, oh, he's just being really polite, but no, he's actually being really sarcastic, because that's one of the ways that Japanese people do sarcasm, is by being politer than they should be to somebody who they really shouldn't have to be that polite to.
Oh dear.
That's so
polite.
Yeah. So like if for example, my friends in college sometimes, to be silly, to be joking with each other, would be like getting their lunch trays and coming in, "Koku ni osori ni natte mo yoroshiii deshoka?" May I please sit here if you don't mind? "Hai, douzo. Really over the top politeness, and it was hilarious to them. Anybody who didn't know Japanese well enough to know what was going on would think they were being ridiculous and didn't understand, why are they bowing to each other? Are Japanese people really that polite to their classmates? Because this was like, the 6 Japanese girls who were the only Japanese students in our whole school, and they were bowing to each other and using this super polite language like, like a customer service rep in a department store would use, or a tour guide on a tour bus would use. And it was just, that was their way of being silly and fun, and I think maybe also dealing with their homesickness, because they never heard that kind of stuff anymore. Because when you're in Japan, you hear that all the time. You go any place where you're a customer, and you hear that language. So, it was, but that, getting back to your original question, which was watashi and washi, there are all these different levels. I mean, if I were to list them, waga hai, ware, watakushi, washi, watashi, boku, ore, atashi. Yeah. So that's what, at least 8 different ways to say I?
Didn't this start from
Uchi,
you?
that's another one, that's 9.
And a lot of the time too, especially kids and women will refer to themselves in the third person.
Yes.
They use their own
Yeah.
name, and you're sitting there like, what? And then like a 20-year-old girl using, you're like, wait, what? It's really weird.
Yes.
But they think it makes them look really cute, so they love using their own name.
Yes.
Plus then you learn their names, so.
Well, that helps, yeah,
That
so,
is
yeah, yeah, well, that's helpful, yeah. Yeah, little kids use it because parents use the kid's name all the time, so the kids think that that's what they're supposed to say about themselves. And sometimes to help the kid learn the proper pronoun to use about themselves, parents will call their kids boku if they're a little boy. Now, I haven't heard a lot of parents use watashi to talk about their little girls, but they'll use boku as if it were a nickname for their son.
My boku.
Yeah, not that way, but like boku wa nani o taberu? What does boku want to eat? You know, you know, it's weird, but some of that is modeling for the little child how they're supposed to use the language, and that's why they do it. So you do hear a lot of third-person speech coming out of moms because they're talking to their little 3 and 5 and 7-year-old kids all the time about, you know, stuff, and they're modeling for the little ones how they're supposed to properly put their sentences together and use their pronouns and nouns and such. But, yeah, so washi is an old-fashioned one, yes. So you won't hear, you know, to me, washi sounds like a guy in his 70s or 80s.
Yeah, they're always like really old anime
Yeah.
characters with guys who say that.
They're trying to emphasize how
Yeah.
old they are.
Yeah, so yeah, I think anime uses these stereotypes and these things that have the connotation to help get that across. I could probably close my eyes and just listen to the anime and know like what age some of these different characters were supposed to be based on some of the language they're using and what the relationships between some of them are supposed to be based on the levels of politeness being used and things like that. There's a lot of information embedded in the kind of Japanese being used. Not just the vocabulary word itself, but which conjugation they chose, and, you know, if there are multiple choices of vocabulary, which synonym they chose.
Yeah.
You know, so there are a lot of nuances that you get after you've been studying this for years.
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't
find
come all at
that's
once.
pretty incredible, just how much is said in just the way that you speak,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
just the nuances and the tones and
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of information conveyed by every sentence. And, you know, whether you choose to use ikimasu or irashaimasu or mairimasu conveys a world of meaning, because they all mean to go, but one is honorific, one is humble, and one is neutral polite, you know, and then you can downgrade it to iku, ike, itte, you know, there's so many different, itta hogai, you know, there's so many different ways to conjugate for politeness and different kinds of information. So let's move on though. So we were starting to do this little role play activity. So so it's Sarah's turn to put this town, which you could just say konomachi, or you could say the name of this town, Melbourne, in where the underline is, and then ask the question.
メルボンについてと思いますか？
はい、どう思いますか?
どう思いますか？
Hi, I know it sounds like a lot of O's, but どう思いますか?
賑やかで綺麗と思います。
綺麗。
綺麗
Da,
Da, okay. Kire da to omoimasu.
okay.
And then after ask.
Yeah, give some kind of like elaboration, like, you know, something you often go and do.
What?
Could tell me
Oh,
what.
watashi wa yoku eiga o mini ikimasu.
Okay?
Sierra-san wa dou omoimasu ka?
What kind of thing am I supposed to say?
Is something about your opinion of Melbourne.
I forgot what hot means. Never mind.
So like omoshiroi, nigiyaka, tsumaranai, shizuka, some kind of adjective that you could use to describe nigiyaka, da, to, omoimasu. Okay. And in this case, since she used the word nigiyaka already, you could say watashi mo nigiyaka da to omoimasu. Okay, because you're agreeing with her, as opposed to the one you and Corey did where there was a contrast, where he was saying the opposite of what your opinion was, so you didn't need a mo because it was a contrast.
If you just said watashi mo, that would just be me too.
Yeah,
Easiest.
yeah, so watashi mo nigiyaka da to omoimasu. That works. Okay, いいですか? じゃあ、タティアンさんと、タティアンさん? Yeah, we've got like 1 minute left. Let's see if we can
Okay.
work this out real quick.
このクラス
に
についてどう思いますか?
面白くて、静かだと思います。私はよく勉強します。タティアナさんはどう思いますか?
私も面白い。I have to say that again.
No, you don't.
Okay. 私も面白いと思います。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ、next time we'll start with sanban and keep going with this pattern. And then we'll get into the next pattern, which uses to plus the verb to say to be able to quote so-and-so said X, Y, Z. Yay!
Yeah, I just got back a few